Welcome back to another episode of Bricks and Dreams podcast, where we get very real about real estate. In today's podcast episode, we're going to be talking many different kind of topics with a real estate lawyer who I can bet has seen it all. Introducing you to Hamza from Bright Star Laws. Together in the last year itself, we've closed a whopping more than 100 deals together. Hamza, welcome to the show.
Arco, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure always to speak with you.
But over 100 deals last year, right? So tell me a bit more about your background. How long have you been in the business? I know it, but I think the subscribers want to know it too.
Absolutely. I've been a real estate lawyer for about 7 years now. Really enjoyed the practice. I have a team of about 5 people that I work with at Bright Star Law, which is my law firm, with the sole goal of just making sure that our clients all have smooth closings. And we've closed, quite frankly, thousands of transactions.
Thousands of transactions. That has a ring to it, right? And I think we are on this amazing curve to kind of grow together, right? As a law practice, as a real estate. And while talking about grow, I think this is the right time to give a shout out to none other than Grow with Navjot, to basically being very instrumental to put me and Hamza together. And together, we are basically building this amazing team together. So Navjot, if you're watching this, here's to you.
Absolutely. Shout out to Nav. I'm very happy that he was able to connect us, and it's been great to see everybody grow and to be part of the process with you guys.
Amazing. So let's start with the basics, right? So what, according to you, is the role of a real estate lawyer in a transaction?
I think that's a really good question, and I'm glad we started off with that. It might seem a little bit basic, especially for people who are in the industry, but for a lot of first-time clients, the first time I have a chat with them, I stop and say, okay, well, what's our role over here? If we're talking especially about purchases, clients very often come to us with a contract that's signed to purchase a property, and the role of the lawyer is to make sure that all the terms of the contract are carried out. So we're really the quarterback. We will work with the purchasers. We will work with their mortgage lender to close the mortgage transaction. We will ensure that they get good title, good ownership on closing, and we'll work with their realtor to make sure that they're getting the property the way that they saw it.
And I love the fact, like how you said quarterback, and you couldn't be any truer than that. So it's not just about paperwork, right? So you're out there, like, saving deals, saving stress, sometimes saving people from, like, buying into real estate disasters, right? So tell me a bit more about, give me an example of what a good lawyer can anticipate, even before those disasters happen. What are the common examples?
Yeah, I think it's very important that you bring that up. Any competent lawyer can bring your deal from beginning to closing for the most part. But what I think a good lawyer will do is to make sure that they communicate with you and your team. And the key word that you used is anticipate issues.
Yep.
So I'll give you an example. Sometimes, let's say you have a rush closing or someone who is about to close, but their mortgage is not ready. Now, a lawyer can either sit back and wait for your mortgage documents to come in and do everything on the last day and make you bring in your mortgage down payment on the last day.
That'll be amazing, right? That'll be amazing to wait till the last day. Sorry. Yes.
No, absolutely. And sometimes that can be okay, but obviously it will be a huge stress to clients. And that's not what a smooth closing is, right? So instead, what you can do is you can prepare, you can talk to your clients, you can really looking at documents, if you have the experience, figure out approximately how much the client will need to bring in, the purchaser will need to bring in, and get it all done. Even a few days before closing, a week or so before closing. One closing cost that I think a lot of people forget, I'll bring up just because we're talking about it, is if somebody's getting an insured mortgage, if you know, obviously you know a lot about this, but sometimes clients won't, the lender will charge tax on the mortgage insurance premium. So if I meet with the client on day one, they're closing maybe 2-3 weeks from now, but it could be a month or two from now. But I'm going to tell them, here's what your mortgage is looking like. Just a heads up, you're going to pay about $2,000 for the mortgage insurance, just so that's not going to be a surprise for people at the last second. I don't need to see your mortgage documents to know that if you have an insured mortgage that you're going to have that cost. So these are things when we have new clients, we'll sit down, we'll talk all about the purchase, the process, the transaction, my role as we're briefly describing here, and then talk about these closing costs so that there are no surprises, right?
Absolutely amazing. So it's a lot at stake. So according to you, Hamza, how should agents, lawyers and clients be working together to kind of ensure that the closings go smooth? What according to you are the most important things?
The number one most important thing is to communicate with each other and to make sure that we all have the information from each other. So Arco, you and I, we've talked about this many times, but a lot of times you'll introduce a client to me, but we'll have a phone conversation. You'll tell me about that client. You'll tell me what's important to them. And sometimes during the conversations, a lot of times you won't realize it, but you'll give me some very important information that I'll need. If we're talking about a condominium, something that's important to them that I need to watch out for in those condo documents, you might tell me whether or not they're a first time buyer, which could affect their closing costs. The more you communicate, the better you can do for your team. If you guys create a good deal, it's my job to close the deal and make sure the client gets a good experience. Something as simple as that. And it goes back to what we originally talked about. It's all about communication and working together, right?
Yeah, I can't help but think like in a situation like this, when the market is very much inclined towards the buyer's territory, there's a lot of power of sales, assignment sales. Now, when these words come across, hit somebody, we feel, and a lot many people feel that hey, it's a steal, right? To kind of go for. Had it been so easy, everybody would have been doing that, right? So why do you feel that you don't see those power of sale assignment sales happen every single day, and why do you think that realtors are not talking about it much? What is the legal implication, and what kind of importance does all these have? If you can come up with an example for our subscribers.
Well, the power of sales are out there, and we can talk about, you know, why there are not more. Of course, we're entering into a territory where quite frankly, I've seen more power of sales than in the past. If you want to get into the details for why power of sales are occurring more often, I think that's just because mortgages are getting tougher to pay for people.
You bet.
There's a very long process. A lot of people don't realize that when a lender sells a property on a power of sale, they have to sell at market value. They have a duty to that borrower, to the person who owns the property.
Absolutely.
But I think more importantly is when you get a deal that's a power of sale, let's call it a unique transaction. It's not that cookie cutter transaction. And that's a time where definitely you call me. You and I were talking about this today, right? You
Yeah.
called me and you were asking me, hey, why is this part of the contract cut out? Again, we're going to keep talking about this probably, but it goes back to communication, going back to working well together, because there are things that I will be able to do well. There's things that you'll do well, and we can complement each other that way, right?
But and this is one of the recent learnings that I had while going through Power of Sale as well, where the Power of Sale forms that the sellers usually provide for you to kind of write the offer on, they're so heavily worded with legal jargons and everything. And I remember calling you up and asking you, hey Hamza, is there any way that we can just have you on this to kind of review the entire offer? So what do you suggest? Like things like in a situation like that, when somebody doesn't know if they're actually going in for something which might leave them vulnerable. What is your take about it? How do you suggest somebody proceed?
For unique transactions like that, you have to bring the contract to a lawyer, and ideally make that deal conditional upon your lawyer's review. And I think that it's perhaps easier to do that these days now that maybe you can tell me, but I think it's more of a buyer's market, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
in these types of transactions, assignments, powers of sales, or even in, I've noticed this in condominium purchases, being able to make the transaction conditional upon the status certificate review. This is a moment where you can bring something unique to your lawyer. You can say the deal is not firm yet. We want to bring this to a lawyer who has this technical expertise that can tell us, well, why are these parts of the contract cut out? How does a power of sale work? What are the implications of all these new schedules that you, perhaps as a realtor, don't always see? And again, just work together to make sure that we bring the best service for the client and they get the best deal for themselves, right?
Absolutely. There was this one client that he was handling where something very typical happened, right? So I'll let Hamza. Do you want to share how you went ahead with that example situation and how did you handle it?
Yeah, this was an interesting one, I say, because it's uncommon that this happens. We got clients, and again, someone introduced me to purchasers who they were buying the property, and the transaction was conditional upon the review of a status certificate. And we can talk more about status certificates if you
Absolutely.
like. But and this is they're obviously buying a condominium unit, and in the transaction, the understanding was that there were two parking spots.
Yeah, and it was even there on the listing, right? So in the listing, it said two parking spots as well,
It
which
was there.
was
Yeah, it was there in the listing. I was getting pictures of the parking spots themselves where the seller was actually using it. But when we dug into the condominium documents, I could only find one parking spot that the seller actually owned. So to give you a little bit of background, what we do is we compare the agreement. A lot of people think that, oh, if the seller told me, then it must be true. And this can be for even simple things. Sometimes clients say all the utilities are included in the common expenses. And I say, well, how do we know? We have to go and check the documents to make sure that that's the case. So in this case, well, utilities is a different situation, but having a whole parking spot is a big deal. We looked at the contract. I could not find a parking spot. We went as far to actually pull a condominium plan, which shows you all the units that you're going to buy. I could only find one parking spot. It turns out that this person thought they owned two parking spots. The condominium property manager thought they owned that spot. So they had it listed in their system as this person's spot. I
wow.
had to point it out to our clients. I said, everybody thinks this is the case, but unfortunately it's not. And I felt bad for that person because they lost the parking spot and maybe I'll let you say what happened in that transaction.
Yeah, we totally picked up the cue. So we never shy away from negotiations. We are always right there to kind of bring the price down at whatever cost, right? So this was a really good option to kind of go in. And like the moment we got to know about this, we basically went in, negotiated really hard, and brought the price down even further. And we wouldn't have been able to do it unless we had a very keen eye who would have gone over and above what he was supposed to do to kind of go ahead and figure out exactly what's happening with the parking spot scenario, right? So this is why it's so important to have a really nice squad built up. And how many times, like, let's take this other example as
Well,
well.
Arco, you said over and above. See, I think I should always do that.
Oh
But
my
I
God.
compare it like that seller, he bought the property. When that person bought the property, they thought they were buying two parking spots.
See,
So
this
there
is
was a
exactly why Hamza is the man, because it's so important to be going with the kind of values that you want to stick by, and to kind of the service that you want to belt out over and over and over again to clients, and that is exactly what sets us up for a quick win, right? And a big win, long term clientele. What are the different types of legal proceedings that can be disclosed in a status certificate?
different types of legal proceedings.
Yeah.
Um, Well, to start off, a status certificate will disclose many different matters about a condominium again, starting from what are the common expenses. It'll show you the budget. It'll explain financial matters to you. And a condominium has to disclose whether there are legal proceedings, and as you said, there can be different types of legal proceedings. So, if we review a status certificate and there is a legal proceeding disclosed, then we're going to discuss, well, what type of legal proceeding it is.
Right.
For example, um, most common, quite frankly, are slip and falls. So someone hurts themselves,
Yep.
and now they're going to sue the condominium corporation because they, for example, they fell in the lobby, and now the condominium is disclosing that there's a legal proceeding there.
How dare there's black ice in the lobby? I'm gonna sue the condo management, and we've seen that all, right?
Absolutely. That's because insurance is involved, and sometimes people can get hurt, right?
Yeah.
And not to say that it's never an issue, but typically those are insured,
Yeah.
right? So if there is insurance covering you, for the most part, you're okay. Now, there could be a different type of legal proceeding that the condominium, again, I think you and I had this where they found that there was a major issue with the parking garage. Well, sometimes, a condominium corporation can have issues where they will need to make a claim against, let's say, the builder, faulty construction, something like that. We've had a few of these. For example, there was one where I think the one you may be referring to was there was an issue with the balconies. They said there's an issue with our balconies, and we're
There
going
were
to need.
two actually. There were two. Like one was the issue with the balcony, and then there was an issue with the parking lot
Yeah, well, both of them. But these are
flooding.
just issues that they're disclosing, and then sometimes they say, "Well, we're going to go into legal proceedings with these." So that's one. But then the other thing you can do is, well, you have to understand is, well, if there's an issue with the balcony or a parking spot, that can ultimately end up into a cost because obviously there's an issue, and unless it's a new condo, which sometimes there can be coverage from our new home.
Italian warranty and all that.
Carry on exactly. But if that's not available, then that may have to be out of pocket.
Yep.
And if that's going to be the case, then we're going to look at the condominium. We'll look at that unit itself, and we might have to figure out what is the cost going to be for the purchaser. So again, it goes back to going back to the seller, potentially asking for an abatement or a reduction in the purchase price. Or if you don't know the costs, well, you know,
Can we
sometimes
just
that can be the
anything?
case, and it depends on the person. But you do the best you can, and now it's up to our clients to decide. Well, are we going to go with an unknown, or are we going to decide that there's other properties out there where we may not have these issues, right? So those are different types of legal proceedings. How's that for a quick answer?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was very short. And you're so true, right? So this is so right. So, and a lot of people think about closing is just getting a key at the end of the transaction, right? And we've been through so many tough situations together at closings, and it is so very important for everybody to know what all can go wrong. And there are some weird ones, right? So tell me, Hamza, give me a few examples that come at the top of your head when it comes to closings and the handling tough situations.
Well, first, I'll say this is typically the biggest purchases of people's lives. And for me, a very large majority of purchases go very smoothly. There can be situations where there will be issues, and you just have to do your best to be able to resolve them. So, well, let's start off with some of the more common issues where you will take your clients to the property and make sure it's still in good condition. Day, I can transfer title, ownership of the property to our clients, and some once in a while you'll find issues with the property. Something's not working. Fridge is broken. Plumbing issues. Well, we look at the agreement to purchase and sell. In these examples, we've talked about microwave not working, fridge. The agreement says these things. Well, typically, your agreement say these things need to come in, be in good working order. So if they're not, we work with the seller's lawyer and look, either can you replace it if you have the time. If you don't have the time, well, our clients will have to buy it, and we have to work with them and make them see our side and get them to pay for that. Sometimes there can be bigger issues, but if there's a minor issue like that, then a couple $100 back so our client can buy that microwave or buy a new fridge.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be as simple as that, right?
Like a holdback. Like just last week, I feel. Do you remember the case where we went in and there were four windows, big large windows, in the living area, and they were air drafts. It was not working fine and everything, and we were promised that they would be replaced at the seller's cost and everything. And day before closing, we went in and none of that was done, and then we kind of did a holdback, which was really cool. And there was this other instance. I think that was the largest holdback that we did, and this is in one of this Matt's case. Matthias, if you're listening this is a shout out to you. It was amazing the kind of holdback that he made happen for one of his clients. Hamza, you want to throw some light on that scenario? That is amazing. I've never heard that.
Before Mateus's case, can I give you a shout out? Because I think you do a really good job of working with me to ensure that we get a good holdback. Because a lot of times I'm, communicating with the seller's lawyer, but I always tell my clients there's different parties that we can speak to, because Arco can go talk to a listing agent and can use his negotiating skills, because a lot of times the seller's lawyer might not even pick up my call and I'm stuck sending an email, and who finds emails convincing, right? As compared
Apart
to
from you,
a
you
nice
find
call from
emails very
Arco.
convincing.
Convincing, but a call from Arco can sometimes be better. And so sometimes I'll get a realtor or a client, they'll come back to me, they'll say, oh, there's something wrong with the property. And we have to do such a back and forth. We'll say, okay, what's wrong? How much do you think it's going to cost to fix? Because we only have one day to get this done. If it doesn't happen, what am I doing for you? How much of a holdback do you want me to ask you for? Whereas I think you and I have such a good relationship now, working together, and a synergy. You'll call me. You'll
Yeah.
say, Hamza, this is what's wrong. Here's how much it's going to cost. Can you ask the seller's lawyer for a holdback for this amount for this time period? And
That's exactly what happened with the Windows as well, right? So there was a
exactly. That's why
holdback.
I was giving you the shout out for the windows, because you called me, you made my job very easy rather than me figuring it out. Oh, how much do, again, you're the one seeing the property. I don't know how much the windows cost, but if you come, tell me the information and give me as much information as possible, that can make my communications with the seller's lawyer in this case convincing. But then you're also doing negotiations on your end and ensuring that the people hold up their end of the bargain. So again,
Absolutely.
working together is always very important.
Yeah, amazing. So this
Okay.
example where we're talking about the development fee, I think that was a huge vulnerability point for my client, who was the
Yeah.
assignee, who was taking up the assignment from somebody.
Well, assignment sales are interesting because let's say you have purchased you Arco have purchased a pre-construction contract, and now you want to sell that contract to me. Number one, typically we'll enter into a contract with each other.
Yep.
Okay. But once we complete that, the next step will be you will go back to that, because this contract is only between us. You will go back to your seller, the builder, and ask for their consent.
Yeah.
And the
And there's a
builder,
separate condition for that, which is like the builder's approval
yeah.
condition.
So you have to get the builder's approval, because this contract is between us, but you're buying from the builder, who in their contracts don't always allow assignment of that contract. So you go back to the builder, and the builder will bring a totally different legal document to you. And at this point, so people are so excited, they've already seen the purchase price.
Yeah.
You don't really understand all the extras that a builder can charge.
Yeah.
And then the builder will put in sections in their contracts. So, for example, if you, Arco, had bought this property and the developer gave you an incentive, they said, you know what, the development charges that we could charge you, we're going to cap that at a certain amount, let's say
Right.
$10,000.
10,000. Yep.
Well, when the builder agrees to the assignment,
Yep.
they say, well, any of those previously agreed on caps are hereby null and void. Well,
Yeah.
then the person who is buying from you on assignment needs to be really careful, because development charges can be extremely high. And you might be thinking, okay, well, I saw Arco's contract, it says $10,000, but you don't realize that the builder is pulling this incentive.
Yes, and you leave yourself so very open to vulnerability right now as an assignee who's taking on the assignment, which was our client, where they could have been charged anything from 50 to 60 to even $100,000 for the while at closing, right? So And we did use a custom condition for this, and
Yeah,
we
so in
kind
that situation, this was where you are paying the assignor, like they are earning money. So you say, well, if the development charges will be any more than, let's say, that $10,000, if they're going to be $15,000, then you are going to cover that extra $5,000
that
for me.
was sweet. That was absolutely sweet. My clients, we were like, "Oh my God, this is
You can do that? Yeah.
we we can do this."
Yeah.
So assignment sales, like and in fact, any sale, you can actually put in whatever custom, like conditions you want to, like legally there. But then we just don't, because the real estate over here is so fiery, so fast, and everything. But with the right time of buyer's market, there is always an option to kind of put in whatever clauses that you want to put.
Absolutely.
We are talking about assignments now. It's very close to pre-construction. Now the other thing is pre-construction deals, and a lot many people think that, okay, so if you're doing a pre-construction deal, and we're doing an offer, right? So we don't even need a lawyer, because you're directly dealing with the builder, and like there is nothing to review. It's pretty much the same and everything. Do you think that's something that's wise? Do you think people should run the pre-construction transactions as well through a lawyer?
Pre-construction transactions are, again, in my verbiage, those unique transactions that are not the cookie cutter deals.
Yep.
You do absolutely do not want to sign those without a lawyer's review. So in Ontario, unlike a used transaction where it comes pretty much in a templated OREA form, right, that all realtors use, pre-construction transactions are typically drafted by a builder and their lawyer, and they're drafted completely in favor of the builder, right? They
You
and
bet. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're a lot longer, they're a lot more complicated,
Yep.
and there are a lot more adjustments, which are charges that
Yes.
buyers have to pay on closing, that are
And
disclosed.
yeah, and the ledgers, like I have sometimes like some of the ledgers that they kind of come up with. I remember this first time when I was talking to Hamza about one of the pre-construction deals, and I go like, Hamza, I have no idea what this means, because it can be made very simple, but for some reason it's just all botched up with the ledgers and everything. And in the end, now I do understand, and it's an easy read for
Yeah.
me as well.
You're talking about on the closing,
Yeah.
and the pre-construction, sometimes you only receive it a week or two before closing, the final numbers from the builder. They're not as, like, you're talking about the statement of adjustments, is not it's not as easy to see when you can only see the agreement of purchase and sale in front of you. Sometimes the builder says, we will charge you for something, but we're not going to tell you how much it costs. So the example that we previously discussed was development charges, but there can be other charges like this, even something as simple as utility meters and
Yeah, the hookup fees.
things like that. So absolutely, I think it's very important to bring them to a lawyer. There can be warning clauses and agreements. They can be disclosing new construction that may happen nearby. So it's a lot of unique situations where it requires you to speak with your lawyer to explain what's important to you, so you can understand the contract, understand that it actually fits your needs, and make sure your lawyer is doing that for you, and also get the best idea of closing costs possible, because again, that's, lifestyle is one thing, and then
Yep.
financial is the other thing.
Oh,
So
100%.
those are the two things we need to watch out
Yeah,
for,
and
right?
you're like literally scraping off every bit to kind of pay towards those really costly homes, because this is one of the most frequently asked question from across different, all our clientele, right? So title searches. Tell me about title searches. Tell me about things that people don't know about title searches. Can we like pull out of a deal? Can we not do anything about title searches? What does it even mean? What are title searches?
Yeah, title search, it's a very crucial part to the transaction. It's a very crucial part to what we do. And whenever I meet with the client in the beginning of working for them, I always explain the process and we explain title searches. And so what I'll say is all property records in Ontario are electronic, and there is registers of properties. So I can see when someone sells and buys a property. This is all public information, by the way. Sometimes my clients are surprised. They say, wait, so you can see, people can see how much I bought this property for? People can see my mortgage? Yeah, that's public information. So a title search discloses all the material legal aspects of a property, meaning like who owns this property, what is the legal description of this property, and we can find that legal description and make sure that that's the correct property you're looking at. Again, because I'm in my office, I'm not seeing that property, but I can show you a map and make sure that the legal description is correct.
You're not having fun. I am, but then you're doing the legal stuff,
I'm not,
making
I
sure
have
everybody's
because I have fun
protected.
reading contracts, right? Different types of things, right?
Wow.
And so it will disclose. So, for example, it will disclose if there's liens on the property. It will also disclose, for example, restrictions. Sometimes there are restrictions on uses of property. It will disclose easements. Easements are if somebody else has a right of way on your property. So the common ones are, for example, utility easements, like Bell Rogers will have an easement over some part of your property for their utilities and whatnot. So that's what a title search is, right? It's giving you all the information about, we call them encumbrances and other documents that can be registered on title to a property.
That's
So
amazing. And so now we understand title searches. What happens if we do a title search? Every property that we go and buy, we do a title search, right? So we have a title search date and we kind of set it 2 weeks. We have to kind of do it till at least 2 weeks before the closing date. Why is that? And what is the legal course of action if something was to come up in a title search that the buyer is not okay with?
this is a really good question. So, when we do the title search, if there is a problem, quite frankly, it's not about whether the buyer's okay with it. You've already signed the contract at that time.
Yeah, I mean,
You have to look at the
if it's
agreement.
not a fixable problem, that probably the seller did not kept it and wanted to keep it under wraps.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, let me give you an example. So, for example, if there's an easement on the property for a utility company, right? Even if you don't like it, the standard agreement of purchase and sale will say you have to accept that easement
Yeah,
on title. So many of these things that affect the ownership of the property are very standard, and hopefully a normal person really wouldn't have a problem with it. But if you're buying a property for a very unique purpose, if you were going to, for example, develop the property for another use in the future, you would probably want to do a title search even before you sign the contract,
absolutely,
right?
yes.
Um, but if we find an issue with the title search, it's again going back to our original. I mentioned this. It's a contractual matter.
Yep.
So the agreement of purchase and sale says if there is a defect in title, if there's an issue with the title of the property for whatever reason, and if the seller cannot fix this issue, number one, or if they cannot insure the issue, number two. So they have options. Then the buyer has the right to terminate the transaction. So they don't necessarily get damages; they get to walk away.
And this is even when the sale is firm, like all the conditions are waived off, all the deposits taken and everything,
Yeah,
literally
yeah,
2 weeks before closing.
yeah. Because in this case, you're saying that the seller cannot give you good title to the property. That means good ownership to the property, and that's what we're doing here, right? You're looking at the property physically, and I'm making sure you're getting good ownership. So if the seller cannot give you good ownership of the property, the transaction comes to an end. Now, I don't want to scare your clients. This doesn't happen often. It's
Yeah.
not like, 50% of the time we're finding issues with properties and 2 weeks before closing, 50% of transactions are not closing. It's a lot, it's a lot
Yeah.
rarer than that.
And part of the reason why we kind of do this title search at least 2 weeks before the closing is because if something was to come up in the title search, the seller has enough time to kind of act on this because my buyer wants to go ahead and close the deal. So the seller has enough time to basically act on this, within that 2 weeks, and at least that can be taken care of. And if it's not taken care of, then we can actually go ahead and pull out of the transaction.
Exactly.
Coming to the current market as well, right? So acknowledging, there are certain things that is happening in the current market, like Polyev, Carney, all of us, there's this huge GST reduction that has been brought into place for, we were talking pre-constructions and everything, and then there's this GST reduction that was announced on any kind of, pre-construction deals for primary residence owners. What is your read about it?
So two major candidates have platforms. They're saying we're gonna make certain transactions, the pre-construction transactions, exempt from GST. So the background is used properties are not subject to a sales tax, right? So I buy your used home. Generally, as long as it's a home, it's a residence, I'm not paying tax on it. You're selling it to me for $500,000. That's how much I'm paying.
Yeah.
However, brand new property, and there's other types of properties as well, but a brand new property is subject to sales tax. So a brand new home will be subject to tax. So when people are buying homes from builders,
Yep.
most agreements of purchases and sales will say that that $500,000 is actually subject to HST,
Yeah.
but the HST is included in the purchase price. So for most people, there's, HST rebate, there are some other
Yeah.
implications,
Yeah.
but for the most part, that's not a big deal. So there's platforms out there, they're saying, well, the government's going to make these sales, maybe it's like up to $1 million or something like that, exempt from HST or excuse me, GST.
Yes. Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, well, okay, that's amazing. That's going to save the average person, whatever, $50,000 because it's
Yeah, and
5%.
a
So
lot of
that's
our clients called us up and like, hey, did you see this? Like, so we're
really,
getting the
yeah,
now the pre-construction homes would be cheaper because
a little bit
now
cheaper. Yeah.
lot big builders are actually saying that actually to them like, yeah, we're going to work something out probably, you know.
Probably work something out. Probably that's interesting. So I'd like to see those contracts because I'll tell you something. If you sign the same contract that the builders drafted the day before this was announced, you would have absolutely no benefit because going back to what I mentioned, the tax is included in the price. So now all of a sudden, if the government is not charging that 5% tax, that just means that the builder is still charging you $500,000 as per my example,
Yeah.
but they don't have to pay the 5% tax that they were going to pay in the first place.
Honestly, like it'll be really up to the builders whether they're gonna, pass on those, benefits off to the people buying or not. Right.
Yeah, and in this market, it really depends, but the people just have to be careful. You can't just go sign a pre-construction property right now and think that you're saving 5% somehow. Because if you sign a contract that was drafted and the way that it's drafted right now, you're not going to save that money. That would be really good. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm not too sure if the builders will potentially pass on those savings or maybe just keep a little bit, if not all, for themselves, right?
100%, and that is exactly why we should be working in tandem, like together to kind of go through all the details properly, understanding all the nooks, and the corners about all the nitty gritties about the legal descriptions or anything legal, very closely with a lawyer. 100%. Wow, that was such a great insight about real estate from a legal standpoint. I almost knew everything. I would love to say that I knew everything, but I did almost know everything. There were a couple of things here and there which came off and like hit me hard, even in this episode for sure. So I mean, it was such a good peek as to how this works. And I'm looking at my watch, and I'm, and I feel I can go forever discussing our experiences. But I also know, Hamza, you're super expensive and you charge by the hour, and I don't think I can afford that. Any last words that you want to say to our viewers?
I just think that you're doing a good job. Going back
Hey,
to Bricks and Dreams, I think you guys are really putting together a really something really big that will not be able to crumble. You guys are creating a really good foundation, a really good base, and I've just been really happy to see your growth.
Hamza, the only reason why we can be so confident in all the deals that we kind of go through with our clients is because we know that there's somebody stellar, keeping a hawk eye on all the legal aspects of the transactions. And thank you, man. Anything that I say falls short. Your entire office, like, Shelby, you share, everybody, does a stellar job, guys. Bright Star Law, if you if you haven't gotten in touch with him, Hamza is the man. He is behind all the volumes that we are pulling through in Ontario, and that he's the reason why we can go off to sleep in peace, and we know that our clients are protected. So very, very big thanks to you, Hamza. Thank you for being part of this episode.
Oh, thank you, Uncle. I appreciate that you invited me to your podcast, and I hope we were able to offer some interesting information to your clients. And
100%.
I'm happy to be back whenever you want.
Thank you
Okay.
so much. Stay good. And to all of you all, there will be some more amazing guests that will be coming on this podcast in the future, in the future episodes. It's going to be amazing. So keep your eyes glued to the YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe it. And till then, we'll see you in the next time. Take care and stay good.